welcome again to the Career Guide Network, and this time we have a, I don't know, do I call you prestigious? No. There's another word for it. All right, but
Special?
nonetheless, yeah, special guest.
Oh.
Yeah, yes, good special. All right,
Okay.
not bad special.
Gotta be specific.
I call her Pearl. Pearl, please introduce yourself to the listeners and the viewers of the Career Guide Network.
Hey, I am Pearl Boshomane Tsotetsi, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Destiny Careers magazine.
All right, you're the editor-in-chief.
Yeah, that's, it's a very pretentious title, but editors of magazines are often called editor-in-chief.
Okay.
So I had to sort of keep up with the times. I generally just prefer editor.
Okay, all right.
Because I'm an editor.
Because like you're, it sounds like you're the president. You're like the commander-in-chief.
Right? Yeah, exactly. It sounds very Trump-like.
All right, let's get to it. Like, let's talk about careers and the career of journalism as a whole, and magazines. Where did it start for you, and how did you know that this is something you wanted to get into, and specifically writing? Like, how did that bite you?
I was 9 years old, and I liked the Sunday Times.
Okay.
Like not a lot of kids. My parents like newspapers, and they like the Sunday Times. So I don't even know if I understood what I was reading, to be honest. I don't even know if I was reading correctly, but I liked the back page, and I liked the Sunday Times magazine. This is like 22 years ago, and I was like, oh, I want to work here. Mm-hmm. That's it.
And that's literally what happened.
That's kind of it, yeah. So then I just started writing randomly, as I started getting a little bit older. Like on my 13th birthday, I wrote a novel. Mm-hmm. In a little, it was like a Sweet Valley High inspired little romance novel. So silly. But I just do things like that. I just randomly write features on people that didn't exist. That's all I did.
So you're pretty unique because you've sort of known for a very long time this is something you want to get into, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But then now for me, I'd like to know, like, what makes a good writer then? What is it about someone's writing that particularly makes them great?
I think, well, firstly, if you put effort into it and if you respect the craft, but also if you remember, I think that it's not about you. So it depends on what kind of writer you are. Okay. You have to decide actually what is the purpose of your writing. If you read a lot, it helps you already just become a better writer. This is like grammatically and, technically speaking as a writer. But if you know who you're writing for, what the purpose is, and you can communicate that message clearly, I think that makes you a good writer. Okay. And if you have your own voice, I think it's important for writers to cultivate their own voice. So don't try to emulate somebody else, because then you won't stand out. You have to write in a way that makes you happy.
All right. So let's start a magazine. You started a magazine, Destiny Careers. How do we start a magazine? Where do we even start? Who do we hire? Who makes a magazine?
Wow, that's difficult. Money. Money's a good one if you've got the money to start a magazine. But the first one I ever did was in high school. It's like the editor of our high school annual magazine for matric. And really you just need people who, it helps to have a computer.
Okay.
To have access to a computer, right? To be like super basic about it. Laid out, like back in the days, people would physically be out here cutting things out, pasting them, or whatever, like arranging a page physically, whereas now you're using like a computer using software. So you don't even need to have like an InDesign expensive kind of software. I think you just start with the basics. So try to make the layout appealing, try to keep it simple, and think about what the magazine's about first of all. So you have to conceptualize, careers, for instance. This is about careers. What about careers, right? So it's like I'm a big mind map kind of person. That's how I plan a lot of things. Very, very old school, but that's what works for me. So it's like, magazine about careers. Okay, what about careers? Okay, and then how do you want to communicate that? Who are you communicating with? How do they want to be communicated with? To deciding just the path that you're going to take and approach that you're going to have. What kind of articles you're going to have? How many articles are you going to have? How many pages are you going to have? What kind of images are you going to use? Are you going to have illustrations? Are you going to, you're going to get stock pictures? How is it going to work? Like, you have to think about every last detail. You have to think about the flow of your product. The same way that you think about, you're a storyteller at the end of the day. So the same way that you think about if you're writing a movie or, planning an interview like this, where you're like, okay, this is where we start, this is where we end, and this is what I want the end result to be. You have to think about when somebody reads it, you want them to leave or to close that magazine feeling a certain way.
Okay.
And so you have to make sure you try to create that kind of content that makes them feel that way. The pictures have to speak to that. The words have to speak to that. The headlines, the subheads. Are you going to have captions? Are you not going to have captions? It's not very sexy, actually. All the planning that goes into it.
All right. So what's a day like as an editor-in-chief? You walk into the office, and what are the tasks that you do? Like, besides, because I mean, people see this end product. They look at the masthead and they look at the editor's notes, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, this is so easy. This is amazing."
Yeah.
But like, what is a day like then in the office?
Well, an editor's job is to conceptualize things. Basically, it's almost like being an art director, and then you have the team, hopefully, who can help you execute that. So a typical day for me is lots of admin, to be honest. Whether it's like meetings or answering emails. It's not sexy, guys. It's not glamorous. It's not fun. It's more fun to be a writer, actually. But, you sort of keep on top of deadlines, talk to your team. How are we going with the story? How's this doing? Changing things around. How far are we with the print product? Okay, what's the print deadline? What's the website? What's going on the website? Oh, have we put things up on social media? It's admin.
Okay.
It's admin.
Admin. All right. So let's take a look at the South African magazine landscape.
Yeah.
And where do you think we are? Like, how do you think we're doing in terms of quality, in terms of content of our magazines, and in general, like, is the space competitive? Is it dying? What's going on?
I'm somebody who's been in newspapers for a long time, right? And I know the newspaper space where we can say newspapers are dying, so sales-wise, and they really are. And it's the same for magazines. I think magazines have actually had it harder than newspapers. And with South African magazines, I mean, a lot of the magazines we have are not, they're like, they're international, right? Like local versions of international magazines. And I found that there was a time when it looked like all the women's magazines specifically were dying, like all the classies were just, it was over for them. People weren't looking for, high fashion and sexy pretentiousness. And I think people really lost touch with journalists lost touch with readers, and readers lost touch with the magazines. And I think there were a lot of magazines that just didn't really resonate and speak to, I think, the changing landscape of the country, and the changing politics of the country, and the economy of the country. And I think that magazines are still in a really bad place, specifically just from an economic point of view. Magazines are a complete and absolute and utter luxury now more than ever. And I mean, I hate to admit it, number one, I never thought I'd go to a magazine. I've never been interested. I've never wanted it. Especially in the past few years, I was like, who'd want to go into a dying industry? I've probably said this out loud to many people. So it's quite funny that now I'm editing a magazine myself, but it just feels like everything is very samey. It's like the same people on the covers. It's the same kind of topics being covered and being recycled. And I like magazines, but I was always buying international ones rather than local ones. I've always enjoyed like more artsy and intellectual magazines, really pretentious magazines, to be honest. And I found that there aren't a lot of local publications that I felt spoke to me and my interests in that instance. But I still think a lot of our magazines are out of touch, but there's some magazines that I think are doing a really cool, interesting job that are trying to shake things up and trying to be a bit edgier and a bit more relevant. But it's a tough market.
But they are like your staples. I mean, like Time magazine and all of these, and in the day and age of like fake news, what people are saying is that magazines are more and newspapers are more trusted because of the source. It's tried and tested. It's age old, and stuff like that. So what I'd say to you is, and the question I want to ask you is, what is the place for magazines now? If it's dying, like what's the point then? Like where do you see the space for them in our society?
I think it depends on what you're offering. Really, you have to add value. Because I personally don't think that media is more trusted now. I should think it's less so. Because also, journalists are under the same pressures as every other industry, where you've got bosses who want you to make money. You've got to be out here, you've got to be sensationalist, or people, newsrooms specifically are stretched so thin, there aren't enough resources, so you're doing like 3 people's jobs. So things are gonna, like, balls are gonna be dropped all the time, and I feel like that has been the case for a couple of years now, not just locally but internationally. The one paper that's doing really well is the New York Times, because they have a huge staff, so their owners invested money in like over 100 people in that newsroom, which is insane. That is amazing. And I come from a newsroom where it was like very few people doing a lot of work. And I think that has actually really affected credibility, to be honest. And I always used to say, when I was in my previous job, which is at a newspaper, was that I think news is dying. But I think that long form journalism is what will keep journalism going.
Okay.
It's about giving people something that they can't get anywhere else. You can get news on Twitter, it's like things break all the time. It's on the internet. Whether it's true or not doesn't even matter. The point is there's very little you can break these days. Breaking news is not the way forward, I think, for anyone.
Okay.
I think that what you need is about giving voice and analysis and meaning and contextualization to stories is more important. And I think that when you have something that really somebody feels like they are getting value from, as a reader, I'm a very critical reader. I think especially because I'm a journalist. I want something where I feel like, okay, you're giving me something new, something to think about. You're enriching my life somehow. Where you want to read something, you don't want to feel like at the end, oh, what was the point of that? So if you have a magazine like Careers, and the reason I agreed to be part of the team that started Yesterday Careers was because I love the idea of it. I love that it's something that can be impactful, where you want somebody to read it and to get a lot of knowledge and to be like, oh, this is helpful, this is useful, oh, I didn't know that, to change the way that maybe they think or the way that they were looking at their own lives. And I think if you're offering people something that really can have an impact on their everyday life or on their career path or on their life path, then I feel like you'll be fine. Then people actually will, if they can, make that sacrifice to buy your magazine or to log onto your website because they know that they gain value from it. All
right. So practically, I'm watching at home or listening, and I want to be a writer, I want to be a journalist. What subjects am I taking? Do I need to go to university for it? How do I get into it?
It's very difficult to get into. I hate to say it, right? But it's the truth.
Okay.
It's the truth because it's an industry that is under a lot of strain financially. People aren't really hiring. People are being retrenched and fired everywhere. I studied journalism, and from my experience and from working in newsrooms and with journalists, I don't think you need to study journalism to be a journalist. There are lots of really good journalists who've studied other things, who've studied accounting, who've studied economics, who've studied law, who didn't even go to university. But you do have to, I think, at least, even if you go for short courses about writing, it's really important to know how to present information. You have to be a critical thinker. Because if you don't think critically and if you don't interrogate everything, then I don't think you should be a journalist. Because then what kind of information are you going to be feeding people? So if you can go for like any sort of short course about like writing or sub-editing, which is like copy editing, even if it's creative writing, and read as much as possible, that makes a huge difference. So pay attention to media, read as many newspapers, websites that you can get your hands on, magazines that you can get your hands on. You need to know what's out there. You need to know what people are talking about, how they're talking about it, how they're communicating it, in order for you to be able to contribute to that kind of world. I think the internet has made it much easier where you can have your own blog. I know blogs are not like popular now, where it's now it's like, oh yeah, be on Instagram or have a YouTube channel or whatever. But try to do something on your own before you try to get into like a professional environment. Like, don't just wait for somebody to hire you, because they won't. You just need to make yourself visible.
Okay, then that leads me perfectly to my next question. So I studied journalism, but now what makes me more employable than the other guy? Like, what do I do to set me up to be able to get one of those few jobs that are in me?
You have to be really ballsy.
Okay.
You do. You have to be bold. You have to, you have to be out there willing to be knocking on doors. And I know it can be quite really weird and daunting, especially if you're a shy or anxious person, but like you have to try and push past that. If you read a lot and you read the kind of publication you want to work for, you sort of figure out what kind of spaces you need to be in to maybe encounter the people who might be working in that industry too. Look around if there are any internship programs, any training programs, call around, email. If you can show up at their door, show up, find out if, can you job shadowing? And like you can try and start with something like that and make yourself a bit noticeable and visible. But one of the realities is that you're also at the mercy of other people.
Yeah.
So you can be as ambitious, as hardworking, as brilliant, as visible as you want. If nobody gives you a chance, nobody gives you a chance. And that's the sad part. But you need to just keep trying. I got in through an internship program. If it was not for like the internship program that I joined at a media house 10 years ago, I don't know. I don't even know if I'd be a journalist. That was how I got in.
And on that mic drop, thank you very much for coming, Pearl. It's been great. And I hope everybody listening or watching has taken some pearls of wisdom. See what I did there? And certainly some insights into the world of journalism and being a writer.